right, a bit of exclusive news, apparently, that Michael Carrick is now the favourite to take the interim job, and it's pretty much going to be confirmed by tomorrow. But before we get into it, just one little favour. Smash the likes. Likes are very important, and obviously you, the people who watch this, kind of control that narrative. A little bit like how the PR for Ole all of last week was controlling the narrative that he was favourite, and I don't think that they were wrong. I feel like this game is kind of confirmed for all what kind of approach Man United want to go for, and I think the fact that it was up to Wilcox to make this decision, which is hands-on and huge for his future at United, it kind of made me think Carrick was probably going to be the appointment anyways. Now, it's not confirmed. Let's get that straight. Man United have not confirmed anything. So we're just going to have to go off what others have said. Ben Jacobs, Alex Crook, who they're going hand in hand. They're with one another. And of course, Jamie Jackson's and the rest of them will filter that through as it goes through the night. Fabrizio Romano, especially David Ornstein, kind of expecting a little something again to drop in the morning. But, I think this is the right decision, in my opinion. Wilcox, who's known for his coaching kind of style as it is, I think he will go down the coaching approach. Now, let's gear some things up. There's rumours that Fletcher's going to be still a part of Carrick's staff and Johnny Evans potentially as well. But you got to look at it like this. I'm not all for this disrespect on Ole's name. Right, first and foremost, it's not his fault. He wants to correct his wrongs, you could say, but you could say, was he the one that got it all wrong, or was it kind of on Man United who sold him out and the players as well? There's lots of different ways you can actually push the Ole thing, but you got to remind yourself the last 10 games of what Ole provided in charge of United, that is embedded, but he's a legend and he gets a lot of disrespect. And for someone that is a legend of the club, people, especially Man United fans, need to remind themselves what this guy has done for us and the history he did make us. So let's get that straight. Ole's a mad manager. Down that path, of course, you can talk about cohesion. You can talk about, strength in terms of, a macro kind of manager. It's something similar to Alex Ferguson. He's more focused on the psychological state of the squad and the culture and bringing an infectious positive vibe to the team. And there's nothing wrong with that. And with United at this moment of time, I don't know if I look at a bunch of players that need a lift or it's a bunch of players that need a bunch of coaching, There's all different ways to compare Ole and Carrick, and I just don't feel that's the approach that Man United need to set themselves if they want to provide the next manager with a bunch or a squad that needs to adapt into a brand new style, for instance. Because if you're going to go with Ole and then you go with someone, let's just say De Zerbi, then it kind of doesn't make sense for the transition. But this is huge. I think there'll be a honeymoon period under Ole, but you got to look at Michael Carrick and what he's done recently himself. Now, Besiktas is something you can compare Ole with Middlesbrough's Michael Carrick. Now, Carrick left pretty much quite evidently because there was no backing for the likes of, Carrick and what he wanted to do to get further up into the leagues. And you could say, is he really this great modern coach that can really, as an interim, at least get United over the line? I think there'll be a lot of question marks over that because he didn't get Middlesbrough there, who were known to be up there in playoff spots year in, year out. But recently, it's not been the case. But the thing is with Carrick, what I like is his tactical flexibility, and his calm persona. And I think that's something very different of what Amarim provided because he was very out there, in your face, talking about players pretty direct and, talking about suffering quite a lot. Now, Michael Carrick's known as a hands-on type of coach. He's the modern coach. Under Ole, he was frequently reported that, Carrick and McKenna were, let's call it the tactical masterminds or the primary architects of the training sessions. And they earn their reputations that way. And now you've seen that McKenna's gone on to do some good things with Ipswich and is still up there with Ipswich. And of course, Michael Carrick is looking for his next kind of job. And this Man United interim spell, I don't think Manchester United will look at him if he does well and think, oh, you know what we should do? we should go and hire him as a permanent coach. But that elevates his CV at the very least, and he can go get probably a better job, more suit that's not in the Championship. Maybe he gets the West Ham job in the future because they'll have some good funds behind them and a decent enough squad to get promoted if they get relegated. Maybe it could be Nottingham Forest. It kind of depends on that. But if you look at the way Carrick is set up, you know, the Middlesbrough sides, you'd kind of notice about, you know, the spaces he kind of pushes these players to be in to make sure there's always, you know, space to attack into. And I'm going to get into that into another video. But I'm going to talk about the importance why Carrick has to be the guy as it stands out of all the options. Now, there'll be arguments for Darren Fletcher, but I think the Brighton game is completely sold him out. But with Michael Carrick, I think for someone who's got quite a managed temperament about the way he goes about things and doesn't really show too much emotion unless it's needed, I think that's probably a good approach to being a Man United manager at the moment. And with United, when you look at these players, I don't look at a bunch of a squad that, yes, it's probably lacking quite a lot of quality outside the main 11 if all fit, but you're looking at a bunch of players that Euro needs coaching, Heaven needs coaching. You know, the midfield just looks a little bit dispersed in terms of their positioning. It could be a very different game under Carrick, under the likes of Ole, who's more free reign and, you know, everyone you go attack and get high and wide. Now, I can talk about Carrick's way of playing all day long. Some may say it looks like a 3-5-2 asymmetrical kind of pattern, but I look at players like Ahmad, you know, and look at players like Mbumo, and I look at players like Sesko Cunha, and we just need to find a way a coach can really come in and get their hands on and just have this team playing a certain way. You've got to look at this as Carrick, for me, in my opinion, again, you've got to look at this as a foundation to build upon. And I don't know if you can find that foundation within Ole. He's a very good vibes type man, in my opinion, and you definitely bring a certain element. But when it comes down to these matches where it could be a Leeds who can be defensively stubborn, Brighton, the way we just lost, we might need someone that's not willing to be reactive in certain approaches, but more proactive. You know, it's a bit like Amram against Leeds. You know, you go 1-0 down and then you're reactive to that approach rather than being proactive and doing it beforehand, you know. And I feel like with Carrick, and if you've seen anything about him, I think he's very much hands-on, looking at the game in a different light towards maybe an Ole, because he was the DM for us. He was the one that saw the game all in front of him. And I feel like midfielder managers are very different to probably what an attacking manager was like. But you know, you look at Xavi, the way he plays football, or when he is managing, or Pep Guardiola, Cesc Fabregas. And then I can only expect the same thing when it comes to the likes of Carrick. These are midfielders, you know. Even Darren Fletcher, to agree, loves a bit of possession, but in the same breath likes to get high and attack them very wide. Very old school like, but I think the modern touch needs something a little bit different with a man that has a brain that functions that little bit differently to everybody else. See, for me, it's just, I just rather have a manager in a different aspect. But when it comes to the hands-on approach, I need someone that's more focused on details. You know, I think today, Brighton kind of shows that we need to focus on the details in certain aspects, because you've got someone like Hurtsler who's willing to change that little thing, which he did after about the 35th minute. And all of a sudden, they're playing with two players up front that's dropping deeper in the attack to focus on gaining possession and hopefully get some counter-attacks going on. So, again, that's where I'm at. I want someone that's a little bit more calculated. You know, I don't think Ole's calculated. Like, I think he is more reactive than proactive. And I think that's complete opposite when it comes to Carrick's kind of way of approaching things. You know, you could say he's more a data-driven kind of substitutions rather than emotional ones, you know, during a game. You know, where you're going to spot where we could do with extra help or somebody that might affect a certain area on the pitch. Now, if you don't want to know, I've got it on my phone as well, and I'm going to just read it out of what was actually said within all of this. This is what Alex Crook said in partner with the likes of Ben Jacobs, who's trying to make a name for himself a little bit more. Is expected to make a decision on the interim manager tomorrow. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was originally viewed as the front runner, but following face-to-face talks with both, Michael Carrick is seen as a strong contender and went to focus on more, saying that he is now the front runner. And then now you've even got the likes of Stephen Howson, who would be in the know a little bit more than the others since he's got his links of Rio Ferdinand, is also confirming that it looks like Carrick is going to be appointed as the interim manager for Manchester United until the end of the season. Now, I've got to ask you guys some questions as well. looking at all of this, and I know this shouldn't be an emotional one, this is the thing with Man United fans. We're very different. I think we are a very emotional type of fan base, right? And we latch on to things with that kind of aspect. If Michael Carrick was to do a solid ass job till the end of the season, would you be objected to give him the full-time role, or do you give it to someone with way more experience and pedigree? You know, that's a question for anyone in the comments. What kind of approach would you go with? And if Carrick was to, you know, if there was an option that Carrick could become a full-time manager, what would he need to do to convince you? Or do you not, there's no convincing and you should just go to a different approach? I look at the way Carrick plays football, and if Man United choose the Carrick direction, which is apparently confirmed at some point tomorrow that it's going to be him, then does that not gear up for someone that's a bit more possession-based and a little bit more forward-thinking? Maybe the likes of De Zerbi, who's been touted as the potential candidate for the Man United job in future? Or is it more like a Tuchel, again, more of a possession manager, little bit more reserved though than the likes of a De Zerbi? But, you know, these players will be geared up for a possession-type formula, type of foundation to go upon. There's a lot of question marks around this, but I'd be buzzing for Carrick personally. I'm at an all-time low as a United fan, to be fair, because every time there's an opportunity, we never seem to make the correct decision, and Ineos are getting a lot of stick, and rightfully so, for making certain decisions, which I'm going to say it dates back to the butterfly effect of keeping Ten Hag in the job after the FA Cup game. I think that's why we are where we are, making reckless decisions based off emotion and not really logical decisions. So I'm not saying this is the correct one. Ole could be the correct one, but we need to be in Europe next year, and we need a very, very solid summer if we want to hit some targets that we want, whether it's Anderson, Belabers, Whartons, João Gomez's, Yan Jamondes, all of these lot. We'll see. Anyways, people, smash the likes, subscribe if you're brand new, and yeah, if you want to follow me along this journey, it's up to you. So in a bit, peace. Let's see you tomorrow or today.